The desperate plea ambassador Zira Kell stood before the massive viewing window of Galactic Trade Station Nexus 7, her crystalline skin catching the light of distant stars. Her hands trembled as she watched the emergency broadcasts from the outer rim colonies. Another world had gone silent. Another civilization had been erased from existence. The Skirani were coming. Behind her, the emergency council chamber buzzed with panicked voices. Representatives from dozens of species argued in languages that the universal translator struggled to keep up with. Fear filled the air like a toxic gas, making even the most composed diplomats speak in hushed, desperate tones. Order, order, Elder Thas's ancient voice cut through the chaos. The Karathi leader stood at the center of the circular chamber, his 6 arms spread wide to command attention. His species had lived for thousands of years, building libraries and universities across the galaxy. Now, even his wisdom seemed inadequate against the approaching storm. Zira turned from the window and walked to her designated speaking platform. Her people, the Velthani, had always been builders and artists. They created cities of living crystal that sang in harmony with the wind. They had never known war until 3 months ago, when the Skirani war fleets appeared at their borders. Honored. Council members, Zira began, her voice steady despite the grief that threatened to overwhelm her. We have lost contact with 7 more colonies in the past week. The Skirani forces are not simply conquering territory. They are systematically destroying everything we have built. The holographic display above the chamber showed the latest intelligence reports. Red markers indicated destroyed worlds, their populations either dead or enslaved. The pattern was clear and terrifying. The Skirani were not interested in resources or territory. They wanted to watch civilizations burn. Captain Sarah Chen sat in the observers section, her dark eyes studying the tactical data with professional interest. As Earth's military advisor to the Galactic Council, she had spent the past 6 months learning about interstellar politics and diplomacy. Her people were still newcomers to this vast community of species, and they were expected to observe and learn, not interfere. But watching these peaceful beings plead for help while facing extinction was becoming impossible to bear. The Skirani war chief Graktor has refused all attempts at communication, continued Ambassador Krell of the Tahari Union. His blue-scaled head fins were pale with stress. They do not want our resources. They do not want our surrender. They want our suffering. Murmurs of despair rippled through the chamber. These were species that had evolved beyond warfare centuries ago. They had built a galactic civilization based on trade, art, and scientific discovery. The concept of beings who destroyed for the pleasure of destruction was alien to them in the truest sense. Elder Thas raised one of his primary arms. What of the Andromedan Defense Fleet? Surely they can... Destroyed, interrupted Commander Vex of the remaining Andromedan forces. The usually proud military officer looked broken. We engaged the Skirani near the Kepler system with 47 ships. Only 3 of us escaped. Their weapons, their tactics. We were not prepared for such savagery. The chamber fell silent. The Andromedan fleet had been considered the most powerful military force in the galaxy. If they could not stop the Skirani, what hope did anyone else have? Captain Chen watched as hope drained from the faces around her. These beings had created wonders that humanity could barely comprehend. They had solved poverty, disease, and resource scarcity. They had built a utopia among the stars. But they had forgotten how to fight for their survival. Ambassador Zira stepped forward again, her crystalline features reflecting the pain of her entire species. My people have a saying, when the storm comes, even the strongest crystal may break, but together we can build shelter for all. We are asking, we are begging, for help. Her words hung in the air like a prayer. Every eye in the chamber turned toward the human section of the observers' gallery. Earth was the newest member of the Galactic Council, barely 6 months into their probationary period. Their home world was classified as a Class 3 death world, barely suitable for life according to galactic standards. Most council members had assumed humans would remain quiet observers for decades while they learned civilized behavior. Sarah stood slowly, feeling the weight of hundreds of stares. She had her orders from Earth Command: observe, learn, and do not interfere in galactic politics. But she also had something that most of these beings had lost over centuries of peace: the understanding that sometimes violence was the only language certain predators understood. "Captain Chen," Elder Thos said carefully, "your people are still new to our community. This matter requires experienced. How many experienced civilizations have the Skirani destroyed?" Sarah's voice cut through the diplomatic niceties. "How many experienced military forces have they wiped out? Maybe it's time to try something different." She walked down to the center of the chamber, her boots echoing in the sudden silence. The tactical display still showed the advancing red markers of Skirani forces, now only weeks away from the core worlds where billions of peaceful beings lived and worked. "You want to know what makes humans different?" Sarah asked, looking around the chamber. "We come from a world that has been trying to kill us since we first walked upright. We've survived ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and plagues that wiped out 90% of all life. We've fought wars against our own species for thousands of years. We know what real predators look like because we are real predators." The chamber was so quiet that the hum of the station's life support system seemed loud. Sarah continued, her voice growing harder with each word. "You've all evolved past the need for violence, and that's beautiful. It really is. You've built something amazing here. But the Skirani haven't evolved past violence. They've embraced it. They've made it their religion, their art, their entire way of life. And you can't negotiate with that, you can't reason with that. You can only stop it." Ambassador Zira stepped forward, hope flickering in her crystalline eyes. "Are you saying humanity will help us?" Sarah looked at the tactical display again, calculating distances and response times. Earth's colonial defense fleet was still 3 weeks away by the fastest route. The Skirani would reach the core worlds before then. But there were human ships closer, commercial vessels and exploration craft that could be retrofitted for combat in the outer territories. "I'm saying humanity will do what we've always done when faced with bullies," Sarah replied. "We'll hit them back twice as hard." Elder Thos leaned forward on his speaking platform. "Captain Chen, with the greatest respect, the Skirani have destroyed fleets of experienced warriors. What makes you think—" "Because we're not warriors," Sarah interrupted. "Warriors fight with honor. They follow rules. They show mercy to defeated enemies. The Skirani aren't warriors either. They're parasites. They consume and destroy without creating anything of value. And we know how to deal with parasites." Activated her personal communicator and opened a channel to Earth Command. "Admiral Morrison, this is Captain Chen. I need you to authorize Emergency Protocol 7. The response came back immediately. "Captain, you are not authorized to make military commitments on behalf of Earth. Your orders are to observe only." "Sir, I'm looking at tactical data showing the complete destruction of 17 civilizations. The Skirani forces will reach Earth's trade partners within 2 weeks. If we don't act now, we won't have any partners left to trade with." The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Finally, Admiral Morrison's voice crackled through the comm. "What do you need, Captain?" Sarah looked around the chamber at the desperate faces watching her. These beings had created art that brought tears to human eyes, scientific discoveries that had advanced human knowledge by centuries, and technologies that had made Earth a garden world overnight. They had welcomed humanity with open arms despite their own fears about accepting a species from a death world. Now it was time to show them why death worlds created such dangerous allies. "I need everything we can spare, sir, and I need it yesterday." The communication ended and Sarah turned back to the council. "Ambassador Zira, how long can your remaining colonies hold out?" Zira consulted her datapad, her crystalline fingers moving rapidly across the surface. "Our latest reports suggest perhaps 10 days before the Skirani reach our core worlds. Maybe less if they accelerate their advance." "Then we have 10 days to teach them why humans are called Deathworlders," Sarah said grimly. "Elder Thos, I'll need detailed tactical information on every Skirani engagement. Commander Vex, I want to speak with every survivor from the Andromedan battles. We need to understand exactly what we're facing. For the first time in weeks, Something other than despair filled the chamber. It wasn't hope exactly, but it was the possibility of hope. The representatives began speaking rapidly among themselves, sharing intelligence and resources with the urgency that had been missing before. Ambassador Zira approached Sarah as the formal session ended. "Captain Chen, why are you doing this? Your people barely know us. You have nothing to gain from this fight." Sarah looked out through the viewing window at the stars where peaceful civilizations were dying while they spoke. "Where I come from, Ambassador, we have a saying too. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. Your people aren't warriors, but you are good people, and that's worth fighting for." As the council members dispersed to their ships and communication centers, Sarah remained in the chamber, studying the tactical displays and planning humanity's first real test in galactic warfare. The Skirani had never faced an enemy from a death world before. They were about to learn why the galaxy's most peaceful species had been so nervous about accepting humans as allies. Sometimes mercy was a luxury that good people couldn't afford, and sometimes the only way to protect innocence was to embrace the very violence that civilized beings had evolved beyond. The humans were coming, and they were bringing the full fury of a world that had been trying to kill them for 4 billion years. The reckoning Admiral Marcus Stone stood on the bridge of the Earth defense ship Valkyrie, watching the Skirani war fleet through the tactical display. After 30 years of military service, he had seen humanity's enemies in all their forms: desperate pirates, fanatical terrorists, and corporate armies fighting over asteroid mining rights. But he had never seen anything quite like this. The Skirani ships were works of art, if art could be defined as the systematic expression of cruelty. Their hulls were covered in spikes and serrated edges that served no tactical purpose except to intimidate. Their weapons were designed not just to destroy enemy vessels, but to cause maximum suffering to crews before death finally came. "Admiral," reported Commander Kai Yamamoto from the tactical station, "we have confirmation of the enemy fleet composition: 47 heavy assault vessels, 18 destroyer-class ships, and over 200 smaller attack craft. They're arranged in a standard intimidation formation." Stone nodded, his weathered face showing no emotion. He had learned long ago that fear was just another piece of information to be processed and used. The Skirani wanted to inspire terror. That was their first mistake. "Dr. Vasquez, what do we know about their psychology?" Dr. Elena Vasquez looked up from her xenobiology console, her data reflecting months of intensive study. "They're apex predators from a world with limited resources, Admiral. Their entire culture revolves around dominance through violence. They literally cannot comprehend the concept of surrender or mercy. To them, showing mercy is a sign of weakness to be exploited." Stone walked to the communication station. "Open a channel to the Skirani flagship." The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the enemy vessel. War Chief Graktor stood at the center, his massive frame covered in ceremonial scars and bone trophies from previous conquests. His yellow eyes glowed with anticipation as he recognized the human ship configuration. "So," Graktor's voice rumbled through the universal translators, "the mammals from the death world finally arrive. I have heard stories about your species. They say you are dangerous." His laugh was like grinding metal. "You are even smaller than I expected." Stone looked directly into the alien's eyes with the calm expression of someone who had faced down insurgents on Mars and pirates in the asteroid belt. "War Chief Graktor, you are ordered to withdraw your forces from this system immediately and release all prisoners taken from civilian populations." Graktor's laughter became louder, and his bridge crew joined in. "Or what, little mammal? Will you send me strongly worded messages? Will you impose trade sanctions?" He leaned forward, his scarred face filling the screen. "I have destroyed 47 fleets, burned 17 civilizations, and enslaved millions of your precious civilians. What makes you think 12 human ships can succeed where entire armadas have failed?" Stone's expression never changed. "War Chief, you've spent your entire career fighting civilized beings who follow rules of engagement, who try to minimize casualties, who show mercy to defeated enemies. You've never fought someone who studied your tactics for the specific purpose of killing you as efficiently as possible." The Skirani leader's amusement faded slightly. Something in the human's voice suggested this was not another plea for mercy or attempt at negotiation. "You see," Stone continued, "we've analyzed every battle you've fought. We know you rely on fear and intimidation. You expect your enemies to panic when they see your ships. You expect them to make emotional decisions that you can exploit. But we don't operate on emotion, War Chief. We operate on data." Commander Yamamoto's voice was calm and professional as he reported, "Admiral, all human vessels are in position. Stealth systems are active. The enemy has lost tracking on our fleet." Graktor's eyes widened as he realized the human ships had vanished from his sensors. "Impossible. Your primitive technology cannot—" "You made two crucial errors," Stone interrupted. "First, you assumed that because we're new to galactic politics, we're inexperienced in warfare. Second, you thought fighting civilians for months had prepared you to face a military force that has been fighting for survival since before we could walk upright." The communication channel went silent as Graktor frantically gestured to his tactical officers. Stone could see the panic spreading across the Skirani Bridge as they realized they had lost contact with the human fleet entirely. "Dr. Vasquez," Stone said quietly, "initiate psychological warfare protocol." Elena's fingers moved across her console, and suddenly every Skirani ship in the fleet began receiving the same transmission. It was not a message or a demand for surrender. It was a recording of the destruction they had caused on peaceful worlds, played back to them with mathematical precision. Every civilian death, every burning city, every act of cruelty they had committed was broadcast back to their own forces. But the recording had been altered. Human technicians had analyzed Skirani psychological profiles and modified the frequencies to trigger specific fear responses in their nervous systems. What the Skirani saw was not their glorious conquests, but a clinical documentation of their methods that made their own actions seem alien and horrifying. "Commander Yamamoto," Stone ordered, "begin the engagement." The first Skirani ship died without warning. The heavy cruiser Blood Harvest simply exploded in a ball of superheated plasma, as a human railgun slug tore through its hull at a significant fraction of light speed. The Skirani had never seen weapons that fired solid projectiles at such velocities. Their shields were designed to deflect energy beams and plasma bolts, not chunks of tungsten moving at relativistic speeds. "Contact bearing 45, Yamamoto reported calmly. "Target destroyed. Moving to next objective." 3 more Skirani vessels exploded in rapid succession. The human ships moved through the enemy fleet like ghosts, their stealth systems and electronic warfare packages making them nearly impossible to track. Where the Skirani expected honorable ship-to-ship combat, they found systematic elimination by an enemy that refused to engage on their terms. Graktor screamed orders at his crew, but their communication systems were being jammed by human cyber warfare specialists. Half his fleet could not even receive his commands, while the other half was paralyzed by the psychological warfare broadcasts that made their own warriors question everything they had been taught about strength and dominance. "This is impossible," Graktor roared at his tactical officer. "They are just mammals. Find them and destroy them." But finding an enemy that did not want to be found was exactly the kind of problem that civilized warfare had never prepared the Skirani to solve. Their tactics were based on intimidation and overwhelming force applied directly against visible targets. The humans offered no visible targets and seemed completely unimpressed by intimidation. Admiral Stone watched the tactical display as his fleet systematically dismantled the Skirani formation. Each human ship had been assigned specific targets, based on detailed analysis of enemy capabilities and weaknesses. There was no glory in it, no dramatic speeches or heroic gestures. It was simply professionals doing their job with deadly efficiency. "Admiral," reported Captain Martinez from the destroyer Nemesis, "we've identified the enemy command vessel, requesting permission to disable their engines and capture War Chief Graktor alive." Stone considered the request. The galactic community would want trials and testimony, evidence of Skirani crimes that could be used to prevent future atrocities. But he also knew what Dr. Vasquez's psychological profile suggested about keeping apex predators in captivity. "Negative, Captain. The War Chief represents an ongoing threat to civilian populations. Eliminate the target. The Bloodfang, Graktor's flagship, lasted longer than the others only because it was larger and more heavily armored. But armor designed to stop energy weapons offered little protection against kinetic projectiles traveling at enormous speeds. The massive vessel broke apart like a child's toy, its pieces scattering across space. The battle lasted exactly 47 minutes. When it ended, the space around the contested system was filled with Skirani wreckage. Of the original fleet of 265 vessels, not one survived. The human fleet had not lost a single ship. Commander Yamamoto turned from his console. "Admiral, we're receiving communications from the liberated colonies. The civilian populations are safe. The Skirani ground forces surrendered when they lost contact with their fleet." Stone nodded but felt no satisfaction in the victory. War was not something to be celebrated even when it was necessary. "Signal the Galactic Council. The threat has been neutralized." 3 days later, Stone stood in the same council chamber, where Captain Chen had first volunteered humanity's aid. The representatives who had seemed so desperate and hopeless were now looking at him with a mixture of gratitude and something that might have been fear. Ambassador Zira stepped forward, her crystalline features reflecting relief and wonder. "Admiral Stone, on behalf of all the liberated worlds, we cannot express our gratitude. You have saved millions of lives." "We did what needed to be done," Stone replied simply. Elder Thos leaned forward on his platform. "Admiral, if I may ask, how were you able to defeat an enemy that had destroyed so many experienced fleets?" Stone looked around the chamber at the faces of beings who had built wonders among the stars, but had forgotten the harsh realities that made such wonders possible. "Elder Thos, you and your people have created something beautiful here. A civilization based on cooperation and mutual respect. But that civilization exists because someone is willing to stand between it and those who would destroy it." He gestured to the tactical display that still showed the wreckage of the Skirani fleet. The Skirani were not warriors. They were bullies. They picked fights with opponents who were too civilized to fight back effectively. They had never faced an enemy that understood violence as well as they did, but used it more efficiently. Dr. Vasquez spoke up from her position in the human delegation. The key was understanding that the Skirani were predators, but they were also cowards. Their entire culture was built around attacking the weak and avoiding fair fights. When they realized they were facing something more dangerous than themselves, their psychological conditioning turned against them. Ambassador Zira nodded slowly. "You fought them the way they fought us, but better." "No," Stone corrected her. "We fought them the way humans fight. We studied our enemy, identified their weaknesses, and exploited those weaknesses with maximum efficiency. We didn't try to intimidate them or break their spirits. We simply removed them as a threat to innocent people in the most direct way possible." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. These peaceful beings were beginning to understand what it meant to have predators as allies. The humans had not simply defeated the Skirani. They had eliminated them with a thoroughness that no civilized military force would have considered. Elder Thos spoke carefully. "Admiral, what happens now? Will humanity take on the role of galactic protector?" Stone looked out through the viewing window at the stars where peaceful civilizations continued their work of building and creating and exploring. "We'll do what we've always done, Elder. We'll protect our friends and allies. We'll stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. And we'll make sure that bullies like the Skirani think twice before threatening peaceful people." He turned back to the council. "But we're not conquerors or rulers, we're just neighbors who happen to be very good at stopping bad things from happening to good people." As the formal session ended and the various ambassadors began to file out, Ambassador Zira approached Stone once more. "Admiral, I have one more question. When Captain Chen first offered to help us, she said that humans were different because they came from a death world. What did she mean by that?" Stone smiled slightly, the first expression of emotion he had shown since the battle ended. "Ambassador, every world in the galaxy that has developed intelligent life is classified as a paradise world, a garden world, or at worst a challenging world. Earth is the only planet in known space classified as a death world. We're the only species that evolved while everything on our planet was actively trying to kill us for 4 billion years. He looked out at the stars again. That doesn't make us monsters, Ambassador. It makes us very, very good at protecting the things we care about, and now we care about all of you. As the human delegation prepared to return to Earth, the galactic community began to understand what they had gained and what it had cost them. They had peace, but it was peace protected by those who understood war. They had civilization, but it was civilization defended by those who remembered barbarism. The humans had not sought to become the galaxy's guardians. They had simply done what they had always done when faced with bullies. They had hit back twice as hard and made sure the bullies could never hurt anyone again. In the depths of space, among the wreckage of the Skirani fleet, a new order was being born. It was still built on cooperation and mutual respect, but now it was backed by the understanding that sometimes the only way to preserve peace was to be willing to destroy those who would take it away. The Deathworlders had come too. The stars and the galaxy would never be the same.